Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our special City Council meeting this evening for Monday, August 17th, 2020. We're going to start with a roll call and determination.
Nordstrom.
Here.
Roberts. Here. Stroman. Here. Armstrong.
Here.
Jones. Here. Lehman. Here. Solomon. Here. Evans. Here. Drew. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. And now we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And now we'll move to the adoption of the agenda, please. Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Jones and a second by Mr. Lehman. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Carries. Okay. Now's the time for general public comment. This is the time for members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the council on any issue not on the agenda. No items will be added to the agenda per state statute for special meetings. Do we have any? One. Yes, great. Thank you. Go ahead, please state your name, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening, City Council, Mayor. My name is Mark Smith. I spoke out here about 2 weeks ago about being in opposition to the defunding of the Rapid City Police Department. Just as a public commentary on this, I found an interesting article from Gallup, who did a survey June 23 to July 26. In the commentary on defund and abolish the police, for Gallup, 67% of all U.S. adults want police to spend the same amount of time in their area, 19% more, and only 14% less. Of the different backgrounds, Black Americans were at 61% wanting the same amount of time, with 20% wanting more. Whites were at 71% and 17%, Hispanic Americans 59% and 24%, and Asian Americans at 63% and 9% respectively. From that, we can see that the majority of our American population wants and supports our police department. That's not the whole narrative, though. Gallup did find, based on some different numbers, that in interactions with our police officers and looking at whether they were very confident, somewhat confident, not too confident, or not at all confident in regards to the interactions with courtesy and respect, here's the breakdowns. Black Americans, 18, 43, 27, and 12. White Americans, 56, 35, 7, and 2. Hispanic Americans, 40, 37, 17, and 5. Asian Americans, 24, 54, 16, and 6, respectively, and all U.S. adults, 48, 37, 11, and 4. So we can kind of glean from this that we do support our police, we do want them in our community, but we do have things that we need to address. Things that we could talk about, ensuring that our funding for our police department goes towards training about de-escalation tactics, proper use of force. We need to talk about how we can ensure that misconduct by our police department, if it happens, is tracked appropriately. We have the same thing in nursing. It's called nurses. It's part of the nurse compact state. It tracks all nurses throughout the different compact states, looking at any actions that may have been essentially bad and deleterious in regards to their performance on the job. Those things are things that we really need to talk about as a community, and ensuring that our police department has good community relationships with our members here in Rapid City. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any more? Okay, thank you. Public comment is now closed. We're going to move on to our non-consent items. Number 1, 2020 Mayor's Budget Presentation. Mr. Mayor, you have the floor.
Thank you. Well, it's budget season again. And this will be the 6th budget that I have presented to this council since I've been mayor, but only the 5th budget that I've actually constructed or worked with department directors to construct. The whole budget process, I have to say, is in a normal year challenging because it requires a lot of deadlines. It requires information, reporting, forecasting. This year has been particularly troublesome because of the pandemic and all of the attention being put elsewhere. And I'd like to thank the Finance Director, Pauline Sumption, and the Deputy Director, Tracy Davis, as well as all the department directors for participating in this process, for putting up with the delays that come along with an odd budget presentation such as this one has been because of the pandemic scheduling. So just as a recap, about a year ago I presented the 2020 budget, and we started 2020 not knowing that in just a few months we would have a pandemic. And so a couple of months after the pandemic started, city staff, especially the finance director, came together and we retooled the 2020 budget to restate the budget authority, the spending authority. And we reduced that spending authority by over 10%. Not knowing, but suspecting the damage that the pandemic would do to the economy and the resulting city budget. So now we're in a little better place time-wise, because now we have more data, more economic data, and we can make a better decision now. And I'll talk more about our forecasting in 2020 and then going into 2021. So to start off, some economic indicators for Rapid City and the state. South Dakota's gross domestic product saw an increase between 2018 and 2019, 2.5% increase in the GDP. So that's positive for us. It shows that prior to the pandemic we were heading in the right direction. Specifically, Rapid City's GDP also saw growth from $7.9 billion to $8.16 billion, 3.3% growth. So we're in true Rapid City fashion. We're slow and steady in growth, and that 3.3% growth in the GDP indicates that everybody's doing their job, everyone's able to do their jobs, and the economy is growing. More indicators. The average weekly wages in Rapid City, March 2019 to March 2020, we saw an increase of 18%. And then to move closer into the, deeper into the pandemic, June 2019 to June 2020, we saw an increase also of 18%, and that is taking into consideration the CARES Act funding that went along with it. Unemployment in March, 3.4%. I don't know what year it was when Rapid City was over 4% in unemployment, but it's been a long time. The pandemic was especially cruel to the hospitality industry and the food service industry in Rapid City and the surrounding area. So in April we peaked, our unemployment peaked at 13.8%, down a little bit in May to 11.2%, down more in June, and the July prediction is under 7% unemployment. So moving in the right direction. Rapid City Regional Airport Enplanements, the number of people getting on planes by month. And I should say, as I was reviewing this information, I saw record years from 2015 through 2019. Every month and every year was better than the other. And then 2020 was starting out as another record year until March, when the early reports of the pandemic and the fear set in. Then the airline industry certainly was an accurate barometer of how things turned in our country. March, we were down by half of what we expected, and April, which has to be an all-time low for our airport, 1,486 people got on airplanes in all of April. when we would expect well over 20,000 in a typical year. So that's been building up the last few months. In July, we're not quite half of what we would expect, but we are moving in the right direction. And there's a lot of moving pieces here with the airline industry working together, mandates on precautions to be taken by airline staff and passengers as well. So from what we know to this point, Enplanements indicate that people are starting to use air travel again, but not to the pre-COVID use. Here's another visual depiction of the airport Enplanements. I thought I should add that just to show the stark contrast between a normal year and 2020, the pandemic season. Hotel occupancy in June was down to 18.5%. In July, 32.5%. So again, something else, another indicator heading in the right direction. We don't have August yet, but I'm sure that's going to be a good month as well. Meanwhile, housing demand in Rapid City is still strong. Houses don't last on the market. Between June and July, the average sale price of a Rapid City home went up again. And that indicates that there's a big demand for housing and that people are paying premium price. We haven't seen any real data indicating a downturn on that front. Commercial building vacancy. This is something that happens, and several of you watching have noticed some buildings becoming vacant, especially downtown. And that is something that is expected due to the damage caused by COVID. In June, our commercial vacancy was 8.8, July just slightly more than that, but we expect this to continue. It's just logical to expect that there'll be more commercial vacancies before this whole thing is over. So the damage to certain businesses is more of a slow burn rather than a hot quick flash, and unfortunately that's what we're seeing currently. Now, Rapid City general sales tax collections minus the BBB tax is a nickname. It stands for the Bed, Booze, and Board tax. The proper name for that tax is the Gross Municipal Receipts tax. This is a tax on lodging, restaurant, food, and entertainment. And so we've extracted that from the general tax collection so that you can see our sales tax performance from 2017. We've had an increase every year. For the first 6 months of every year, we are still on an increase. We had a slight increase in June 2020 over June 2019. And it was $100,000 or tens of thousands of dollars. It wasn't much of an increase, but it was an increase. Something that frankly surprised most of us, because by this point we had anticipated about a 10% downturn in sales tax collections. So far so good. Now this doesn't say anything to what's coming in the next 6 months or the next year or 2 years. This is a snapshot in time of the first 6 months of 2020. So, hypothetically speaking, we start into the fall and winter and we see dramatic downturns in the city's revenue projections. We've proven to ourselves as a council that we can come together, analyze a threat to the local economy, and retool our budget. So I feel confident saying that so far so good, this is good news. And we'll keep an eye out on a weekly and monthly basis to see how we're doing in the future. Now, to look at the BBB tax in the first 6 months paints a bit of a different picture. As I mentioned earlier, this tax especially, this pandemic has especially caused a downturn in lodging and restaurant food and other entertainment venues. And so we've seen a pretty sharp decrease in that BBB tax for the first 6 months of 2020. Building permit valuation is another economic indicator we use to see how the building industry is faring, how consumer confidence causes the ultimate construction of buildings and homes and businesses. And so, for a little backstory, in about 2011, Rapid City finally topped $200 million in building valuation for its annual permits. And there were people at the time that said, oh, that's a fluke, that'll never happen again. And then it happened again in 2012 and 2013, 2014 and 15. And then in 2016, we topped 300 million, and people said, well, that's a fluke. And so it'll never happen again. So we saw it happen again and again, 4 years running. All the way up through 2019, we had building permit valuations well over $300 million. Well, now in 2020, I'm just going to tell you this is a fluke, okay? 2020, first 6 months of building permits, we see that not every year in the past has started out strong, but that's especially true for 2020. What we've seen this year in building permits are several hundred more building permits being sold, but for smaller projects, for home, new construction, remodels, major repairs, additions, that sort of thing, and some lighter commercial work. We've not seen those single large commercial projects that have propelled those numbers in the past. So 2020 starting out, we're not yet at $100 million in valuation. In fact, we're at the slightest 6-month start for any time in the past 7 years. So there's question this year if we'll really make $200 million on total valuation. I think that all depends on the coming season and the confidence of the banking industry and the investors and the commercial businesses. So time will tell. So here's some budget highlights. Now what I'm going to show you is some pages full of numbers. I just have to tell you that these are not all of the numbers. These are the things that you would generally acquaint yourself with when it comes to city budget. There are many, many more details that can be provided you if you would submit a question to the finance officer or myself. We can get all of the questions the council may have about this budget, but I'll show the highlights here. These are our revenue, sales tax, as I already mentioned. We are up in 2020 more than we imagined. We're predicting a slight lag in 2021, more in line with the 2019 overall picture. Property tax is up. There was a concern, I probably shouldn't be telling all these stories because we only have an hour here, but there was a concern early on when we recalculated the 2020 budget that there were going to be a number of people not paying their property tax because they would not be able to afford to. And if they don't pay their property tax by the end of the year, then we don't get that money. It comes in a later year. And so we were predicting a shortfall of that. Well, a recent check with the Treasurer's Office indicates that probably more people are paying their taxes now than normal. I think there are actually more receipts in 2020 than there were in 2019. So we're expecting an increase in property tax revenue. And then as you go on down the line, other taxes, those are the BBB and so on. Grants and government revenue, these are not stable numbers year to year. They depend a lot on what's going on. Well, in 2021, we're going to see almost a 60% increase in grants. And so that's going to affect some of the budget numbers you're about to see from individual departments. And this is a good thing. The license and permits sales are down. Court fines we expect to be down. Sales of goods and services, we expect those to be down as well. And overall, now we get down to next to the bottom line where it says undesignated cash. So this is a revenue sheet. These are the major sources of revenue, major categories of revenue. And undesignated cash means that this is cash that was once budgeted, but is no longer budgeted because it was not spent, or it was kept in reserve and not available for spending at that time. And so historically there's been a bit of a controversy over the use of undesignated cash, and in several years we've tried not to use any of it. However, 2021 is a year that comes after one of the weirdest budget years of our careers, and that's 2020 and the results of the pandemic. So, as I mentioned earlier, mid-year we recalculated our 2020 budget and we started spending less. In fact, we're spending 10% less overall. Meanwhile, we're earning about the same amount of money. That's creating more cash available that is not being spent. So that sounds great if you're the type of business that provides a dividend to its shareholders. However, we are, this right here on undesignated cash, this is where the overall budget philosophy comes into play. And the budget philosophy for the 21 budget is that we think we need to normalize city services. 2020 is a brutal year, and when we made cuts mid-year, many of them to recreation and other areas, we heard it from the taxpayers. We heard that not only are they dealing with the stress of living in a pandemic and their own financial issues, but they're also very disappointed that we couldn't see fit to fund the swim center and the ice rink and swimming pools and mow city parks and cemeteries on time and that sort of thing. We made some deep cuts, and although we've adjusted and we've picked up many duties just on a different timetable, we think that all in all we need to have a relatively normal budget for 21. That will mean normal services available for 2021. So this is essentially an ask to use $750,000 of the money we won't be spending in 2020 because of the cuts, but instead spend it in 2021. Okay? Enough on that. So the total sources of funding for the general fund, $68,988,907. And here's a visual of where our sources of revenue are. Sales tax still the biggest at 42% of all general fund revenue, and property tax 28%. I believe the first budget I constructed, that sales tax figure was 46%, and I believe the property tax figure was around 22 or 23%. So I would say we've made a little bit of progress. As you know, when you go to an investor, they would advise you not to put all of your money in one thing, because when that one thing performs poorly, then you perform poorly. So we're limited, realistically, on how we can diversify our revenue, but we've done a little bit here over the last 5 years to get our dependence a little bit lessened on sales tax. Now, general fund expenses. We have mayor's office and council holding at a 1.7% change. Attorney's office, there's several asterisks in this presentation, and that's to remind me to explain something to you. So the attorney's office is a small department, and so added expenses on a small budget create a large percentage increase. So in the city attorney's office, with wages, benefits, and a newly imposed 5% increase on health insurance citywide, we incurred much more than the inflation rate of 1.7%. We incurred about 5.2% of an increase in that attorney's office. Now, the two figures there, the 30.2, I have added into the city attorney's office $95,000 for the Human Relations Commission to get started up. That brings the general fund burden of the city attorney's office to $494,000, or an increase of 30%. So again, small department, large percentage increase is much easier with less money. Public Works, we see an increase there of 4.2%. Much of that is 2 rapid ride buses that are going to be purchased in 2021 for a total cost of about $200,000. So that increases the percentage of the increase over 2020. But the asterisk tells me to let you know that 85% of the cost of those 2 buses are being covered by the federal government. We still have to budget for them. It still raises the city budget, but on the revenue side, it supplements. So that is a 85% neutral. It's not quite a neutral, but it's a 15% burden on Public Works. So community development, because of transportation planning, community development's budget seems very volatile. Year to year, it can vary by a few $100,000, and that's what's happening in 2021. In fact, to move backwards a little bit, if you look at 2019, $3 million, $5,000, it went to $2,755,000. Well, that's because there was a $300,000 grant in 2019 that there wasn't in 2020. That's the only reason for that. Now again, they are bringing in $353,000 in federal grants, which then puts the budget at $2,883,000. Police and fire. Those are large departments. There are a lot of wages and benefits being implemented there via union contracts, but also of note is the 5% city employee insurance increase. That increases the budget, and they're not able to withstand staying at the inflationary rate for an increase, not without laying off people. So what we see in the fire department's a flat 3.6% increase, but on the police department side, there are additional grants in that department which raise the number more, but that number is 6.9%. Police department brings in about $850,000 in grants for 2021. Human resources has gone down 10%, but I'm told not to get used to that. They have had some difficulty hiring qualified people for some positions, and they've done a little bit of reorganizing, and they're going to try to make a smaller staff work for the same thing. It's a good effort. I'm glad they're trying it. The library, with an asterisk, $3,490,000. The asterisk is just to remind us that also included in that budget is the $400-some-odd-thousand, both in expenses and revenue, that come from Pennington County for the Pennington County Library Service. So that's an offsetting revenue and expense of over $400,000. Finance and information technology, pretty run-of-the-mill numbers there. Parks and Recreation at about almost $7,900,000. City Hall maintenance. I'm happy to report I think we are through the transition of teaming up with the city's school administration building to the city's schools to run this building. So we've gone from having a shared ownership in the building and having the schools provide all of the maintenance and janitorial, to a year where we had contract cleaning service, and now to this year where we have released the contract cleaning service, and we have our own internal employees in maintenance and janitorial. So things are smoothing out there, and I think it's been a change for the positive. The government buildings other category is an insurance premium for a few city buildings. The reason for the large increase in 2021 is because of the buildings purchased entitled to the city of Rapid City for use by One Heart. So city is picking up the insurance on those buildings. Dispatch, Those numbers are just a little bit less than last year. The asterisk is to say that what's not shown here is the $31,500 in revenue from the ambulance service. So the actual cost of doing business in dispatch is $31,500 more than what's shown there. Emergency management, Dustin Willett wants to bring attention to the fact that he's saved the city $4. Be sure to reach out and thank Dustin when you see him. Search and rescue is the same. Humane Society, 1.7% increase, same with Working Against Violence. And the Doll Rapid City Arts Council, 1.7. Economic development remains the same. And Black Hills Council of Local Governments, we adjusted that figure a little bit based on the reality of what we're using them for, and we have over budgeted in the last couple of years. More general fund, we have the Journey Museum in 2021 coming in at $334,100, the Cornerstone Mission at $100, the senior centers and Lifeways the same as last year. Performing arts with a 1.7% increase, early childhood connections the same, and I have added back into the arts contingency fund $24,000 and some odd dollars to make the arts contingency fund around $100,000. Puts the total general fund budget $63,604,902 to match the revenue. And here is a visual depiction of the city's priorities. Talk is one thing, but when you look at the pie chart of your actual expenses, you get to learn exactly what, in fact, what your priorities are. This city values its public safety. And public safety is not just police and fire, it's also dispatch, and it's also part of the Humane Society budget, and everything that goes to keeping us safe here in this town. Almost 49% of the entire general fund budget to public safety. Next is public works at 19%, parks and rec, and then administration, which by the way includes city attorney and HR and the mayor's office and council. And so that's a picture of our priorities right there. Okay, enterprise funds. These enterprise fund is a city-operated department that operates as a business. They expend only what they earn through user fees. And so the Civic Center is projecting a 10% increase in their 2021 budget. They will be adding about 6 full-time employees in 2021 when it comes time to accommodate for the new arena opening next fall. Fire department, EMS operations, this is the ambulance service coming in at slightly less than last year. And Rapid City Regional Airport at about a 24% raise. Now they're one of those departments also where their budget can vary from year to year based on the amount of federal funding for certain projects. But one of the things happening at Regional Airport is they are adding a few employees as well. They're letting a janitorial contract go, hiring their own custodial staff, which will be an improvement in operations out there. Parks and Recreation, essentially we have golf here, and Meadowbrook, both Meadowbrook and Executive coming in a little bit less. And just as a side note, the park improvements slated for 2021 out of the Capital Improvements Fund, $966,000. And more enterprise fund, Public Works. These are the big ones: the solid waste collection and disposal, the materials recovery facility, or the MRF, or the recycling center. There's some budget variation there. In solid waste collection, I'm just using the asterisk to bring your attention to this isn't actually a 33.7% increase over last year. The fact is 2020 was an inappropriate reduction of that budget. They were taking some chances trying to save money, and they reconfigured a bunch of things, and it didn't work out as best as it could have. And we have new management in place out there in part because of this. So compare 2021 budget to 2019 budget, and that's really the cost of collecting your garbage and taking it out to the landfill. Solid waste disposal and the MRF budget is down a little bit as well. All of these big utilities rely on large equipment and machinery, and so that is the primary reason for the budget variance from year to year. The water enterprise up 5.5%, and then water reclamation, that's the sewer plant, down 0.9. So all of the, and these are not all of the city's accounts. There are a number of special funds and accounts available on request, but if you're like me, you won't fully understand how they all work together until Pauline Sumption has spent an hour or more with you. So our grand total for the 2021 budget proposed is $176,786,538, or a 0.89% increase over last year. Here's a recap on infrastructure spending. The CIP streets in 2021, looking at $10,315,000, as well as urban systems streets. That's the federal grant money that comes through the state. So around $13 million total for street spending. If you're wondering about the variance between 2019, 20, and 21 under CIP streets, that's because there is money, about $3.5 million in the 2020 budget, not yet spent. Some of that has rolled over from 2019. The unspent money in 2020 will roll over into 21, and that number will become inflated. And then water infrastructure, $7.6 million, water reclamation infrastructure, $5 million, stormwater, $1.3, and parks, nearly $1 million for infrastructure additions in 2021. Major challenges for this 2021 budget. Again, this is a repeat. This is a cut and paste from other years. An over-reliance on sales tax revenue creates nearly unpredictable long-range revenue forecast. Well, that's not a problem that I'm expecting you to solve here at this meeting. That's just a bit of awareness for us that with 42% of all of our general fund revenue in sales tax, when something like a pandemic or whatever it might be next time happens and it affects that huge revenue source just a little, it means big consequences. Sales tax is the most volatile source of our revenue, and many things can disrupt it, as we are learning right now. Demand for city services is increasing. Rapid City population growth since 2010, 14%. Since 2006, we have added in Rapid City 150 lane miles of roads, or increased our road system by 13.2%. And in the last 10 years, we have added nearly 2,000 single-family homes and nearly 2,000 multifamily living units, so 4,000 in 10 years, so around 400 new living units per year. Obvious major challenge for the budget is COVID-19 is producing threats to the economy, but most of them at this point are unknown. We don't know fully what's going to happen this fall and winter and how businesses will be affected by it, so that is a lingering threat. Increased need and expectation on human services delivery. This is a real thing, and growing homelessness. I've lived in this town for 35 years. Many of the homeless individuals that hang around in the downtown area know me by name, and I'm telling you, just like you may be making your own observations, there are new people in town. And so I think this is a challenge for us, because there are groups, community groups out there that want to help, don't have the wherewithal or the collective energy to make significant changes. We are on the cusp of seeing the One Heart campus open. We're in about starting the 3rd year of the county's CARE campus, but this doesn't mean we have unlimited capacity to take care of homeless people. And so we're going to be tested here in the coming 6 months or more when the weather changes. So more on that in real time. Major opportunities. Population is increasing. This is good for us. There are many people who want Rapid City to be a small town, and I don't know if you've ever been to a town where the population is decreasing, but it's not a pretty sight. Population increase is good for us. The building industry is healthy. I wouldn't say it's booming at the moment. However, there are construction companies, probably every construction company in town is looking for employees, are putting off jobs because they don't have enough people to work. But this is a healthy industry. There's a lot of change being created by this industry. Elevate Rapid City, the innovation incubator on East Boulevard, is opening in January and will have on day 1 40% occupancy. That's a very positive thing for us, our relationship with the tech world, our relationship with School of Mines. There are many, many opportunities there. And the 5th and St. Joe Street lot is still a viable project. No doubt it has been paused at the moment due to the pandemic. There are a number of funding institutions that have put the hold on some major developments, not just in Rapid City, but everywhere. But that's still a project that will move forward, just not quite on the same schedule as before. And of course, the B21 community. This B21 is still happening, and it will be taking shape over the next several years. So that's very positive for our community. So in summary, the 2021 budget's balanced. The goal is to return city services to pre-COVID levels. Sales tax collections are susceptible to negative influences from various sources, and protecting the city's interests is the same as protecting the taxpayer interests. When we're watching how the town is developed and how it's funded and how things are out on the streets and in the businesses, how the home sales are going, everything, it equates to the overall health of Rapid City. And when we say it's good for the city, that means we have to say that as synonymous with it's good for the people who live here and fund this particular city government. So that's it for the presentation. Just have a few minutes left. I would encourage any questions on details. It would be easy, and it would keep us accountable if we could receive those questions on email or in some written form. And then when we have future dates for budget meetings scheduled, we can reply at that time or in advance in writing as well. Is anything for me right now before I leave? Darla.
Thank you. Every year we hear that the over-reliance on sales tax revenue creates this drain on us. You know, it's unpredictable, but we never hear any recommendations. And I know that's a touchy subject, but I've been on the council 6 years, and maybe we should think about what we can do so we aren't so reliant on this, you know, sales tax revenue. So.
Good point. And I know this is unpopular, and I don't want to start a fight here tonight. But primarily, the goal of me bringing that up every year is to just keep us aware that a glitch in the economy can have big consequences and immediate consequences for us in this particular city. So that's the primary goal, and that goal is accomplished because you're asking a question about it. But secondly, I believe one of the things that has been positive to that end is that for several years we have accepted the property tax CPI. That very small percentage of CPI increased property tax, and that has built up the property tax revenue and therefore has a lessening factor on the sales tax. Now, I'm not saying replace sales tax with property tax. I'm not saying raise property taxes. But for the inflationary adjustment that is offered for the taking, I think it's been best for us to take it. I know that's controversial, and we're going to hear more about that as we start approving this ordinance down the road. But that's one way to do it. And any other ideas, I'm all ears.
I'm just throwing that out there, that it's something that we actually do need to take some time with, because it's haunting us year after year. So thank you for your answer. I don't expect you to have a crystal ball, so thank you.
Any other questions for me tonight? All right, thank you, everyone.